Welcome to Sacred Harmony, where intuition meets transformation. Tonight, we are joined by Caleb Matthews, a spiritual strategist, dream interpreter, and motivational speaker who has guided thousands worldwide in discovering their purpose. From festivals to Bible colleges, Caleb bridges intuition and practical action, helping people awaken their spiritual senses and steward their inner sanctuary with clarity and power.
Thank you, Anya. It's great to be here on Sacred Harmony. It's also an honor to be here with you and the audience, and I'm very excited for our podcast today together.
So am I. So, Caleb, you talk about aligning with heaven's frequency. How would you describe that to someone who has never explored spiritual alignment before?
Hmm. That's a good point to start off with. I would explain it from this perspective, and that is looking at the human construct in the DNA of our individual design as people. And everyone's got their own interpretation for what I'm about to say, but this is just my perspective, just to give a bigger picture. And that is, I believe that we are three-part beings created spirit, soul, and body, not just a mind with a body, but with the spirit. And what do I mean by spirit? I mean an invisible influence. Some attribute it to God, higher power, creator, positive energy, unseen inspiration. But there's a three-part being at work in our individual human framework and design. I would begin with that because most of our world right now is being encouraged to pursue understanding and knowledge and intellectualism and also physical attributes and goals, but not too much of the world is tapped into, at least out in the Western part of the world, more so in the East, the unseen spiritual higher power influence of spirit, soul, and body. I would begin there, that heaven's frequency begins by being aligned with an understanding that we are three-part beings, spirit, soul, and body, and coming into alignment with that in our own interpretation of what that looks like.
That's amazing. And can anyone tune into it, or does it require prior practice or experience?
I say everybody can tune into it. It's to use an analogy, everybody has these same opportunities, but as far as developing the muscle of those opportunities is up to us. There's a certain dual answer to that question. I believe there is. And that is everyone has the same opportunity. We all have the same time construct that we live here in the world system, the 24 hours in a day, the 7 days a week, the 365 days a year, minutes and seconds. We all have the same opportunity. As far as developing that opportunity into a muscle, into a habit, into a culture, into a lifestyle, that takes work to be able to step back from the busy hustle culture of our day and age, especially with technology, and say, okay, I am going to put my feet on the ground, so to speak, in my own sacred harmony and do my own work, my own inner work, and say, this is going to be my commitment I'm going to put into it. So to answer your question, I believe we all have the opportunity. But as far as does everybody take advantage of that opportunity? Well, no, some more than others, but it's all about developing that muscle. Just like at the gym, there are gyms and there are places to work out all over the place in our cities. But as far as taking that opportunity to actually go and put the hours in, it's no different when it comes to our spirituality and that sacred harmony and that inner sanctuary of the spirit.
That's fascinating. Like the idea that alignment isn't just mystical, but a skill we can cultivate in daily life.
Absolutely. 100%.
And dreams often serve as guides in your work. How can someone learn to interpret the messages their subconscious is sending?
Yes, I would say the place to start is stepping back and asking a question. And this question is something that is one of the first principles at play when it comes to stepping back and interpreting, or at least attempting to interpret and find understanding to one's dreams. And that is, what is this a picture of? What is this story trying to communicate with me? Just like a book. You pick up a book like Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings or The Alchemist, famous metaphorical, allegorical books and novels, and we say, okay, what are these images and what are these characters trying to communicate to me? And in dream interpretation analysis, that our subconscious, higher power, God, spirit, whatever you would attribute the source of these dreams to, you step back and you ask yourself, your spirit, your higher power, okay, what does this mean? What is this a picture of to me? Because my dream of a German Shepherd, a dog, is going to be a different interpretation or at least a different outcome than somebody else's. For you, maybe a German Shepherd or a Labradoodle or a Golden Retriever means a faithful friend or someone who is just there for you to be able to pull you up out of a bad situation. A German Shepherd for me in my childhood experience was a dog that always chased me down the street, and I was terrified of it as a young child. So it wouldn't mean the same for me as it would for somebody else. But we always have to ask these questions of ourselves. What is this a picture of? What is my dream trying to tell me? How do I decode this and get into the code that's behind the actual allegory and the imagery and the message of the dream? But this is an important thing to ask ourselves, to ask higher power, to ask God. I believe that dreams come directly from the hand of God, but everybody's got their own interpretation. But just the actual framework and the posture of the heart to step back and say, okay, this is important. I need to stop my busyness and just really write this down, chew on it, and ask myself the question, what is this a picture of? And when we do that from that point, then we can start to lean on the road of understanding.
Yeah, 100%. And are there common mistakes people make when trying to decode their own dreams?
Yes, common mistakes can be taking everything literally or many things literally. Oftentimes, if there is a warning or a highlight of something or attributes or elements, our human minds can sometimes often get in the way. Our soul can get in the way of our spirit when it comes to a pure interpretation and understanding, and we think everything is literal. To use an example, maybe a common dream is that you dream of seeing somebody who's a friend or a family member, and that friend or family member tells you to go in this direction or that direction. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to go in that direction. Well, maybe sometimes it could mean that, but oftentimes it's more or less a metaphor for something else. But if we take everything literally, and sometimes we can get into trouble. And it's a good idea to step back and ask ourselves, okay, where is this dream coming from? Is this dream coming from my own soul, my own mind, will, and emotions of what I'm trying to project into my subconscious? Or is this coming from God, from spirit, from source, as a direction for something for me to lean into? But oftentimes and many times our dreams are allegories and metaphors and a picture of a message that we're supposed to follow, not necessarily literal. Literal interpretation of a dream oftentimes can get one into trouble. That's what I've found.
Yeah, dreams as a roadmap. It's like having a silent mentor whispering guidance if we know how to listen.
100%. Yes, it's the inner nudges, the divine code, the guide that will direct our compass. Absolutely.
And you emphasize stewarding an inner sanctuary. What does that sanctuary look like, and why is it essential for spiritual growth?
The sanctuary is important to be able to build from, because I believe in one of the principles that guides my life and guides the lives of humanity, of people. It is this reality, and that is peace is the potting soil of revelation. It's a garden, so to speak. It really is difficult to be able to work and activate and walk in full potential in our lives as human beings if we aren't stewarding a sanctuary, an inner sanctuary of peace. If our lives are always chaos, it's not just a season, because there are seasons of chaos. There are seasons of, things can go crazy, and that's part of navigating through the human construct. But if our lives are always chaotic and there's no time for peace, there's no time for stewarding that inner sanctuary, then it's very difficult to be able to grow our own tree of life, our own individual trees. Human beings are often attributed to trees. In fact, in one of the ancient texts of the Bible, when Jesus is praying for a blind man to see and receive his sight, Jesus asked him the first time after he prays, "What do you see?" And the man's response is, "I see men like trees walking. Well, people are often attributed to trees in this life as a metaphor. And I believe that we have our own individual tree of life to grow. And in order for the roots to grow and to take on spiritual sustenance in the waters of life, we have to be in a place of peace, a posture of peace. Now, peace doesn't mean, oh, I have to spend 2 or 3 hours a day in meditating. That's not what I mean, because that's performance-based metrics. What I mean by peace is a posture of peace. It could be waking up in the morning for 2 or 3 minutes and before turning on the phone or jumping on social media or having breakfast or walking the dog or getting your tasks lined up for the day of what you're going to do at work or what errands you're going to run. It could be just getting into a sanctuary, an inner sacred harmony, a frequency of posturing and turning one's heart towards God and towards the Spirit, the Kadosh Ruah, the Spirit of life, and saying, okay, God, I'm going to make room for you in these 2 or 3 moments of I'm gratitude, my thankfulness and appreciation that I have another day where I'm able to enjoy and to steward. And that gratefulness, that gratitude, however that looks like for you and for me and for our audience, just that posture of heart, because it's not about the amount of hours that we spend stewarding our inner sanctuary. It's about the intent. So if our 2 or 3 minutes of intent is more on par and on tap and dynamic than 2 or 3 hours of just religious striving, then I think that is really where the main focus is and where God wants us to come into as spirit, soul, and body, as individuals.
Yeah, 100%. And how do we protect that space amidst daily chaos and external distractions?
I would say the pie chart. There's a pie chart that I try. I do my very best in my human imperfections to live by, and that is the important, the non-important, and the average. Imagine stepping back, and we'll just get back into the dream analogy for a minute. Stepping back and say in a dream that you see a pie chart floating in front of you, and you see the important, the not important, and the average. And you see that as a chart. And then you wake up and you're like, okay, what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to walk us through as an audience of what we do with that. And let's just guide this through. And that is take your life, take our lives as a pie chart and put all those areas into each of the 3 quadrants. What are the important things? What are the not important things? And what are the average things? And this is what it means to guard our lives so that we can truly steward that sanctuary of inner peace and that sacred harmony. Important things, an example for important things is family, friends, time with God, and also our purpose on the earth. What I like to say, walking in our full purpose in our DNA of design. These things are important. Not important would probably be, okay, who's going to win? Who's going to be the next winner of the next sports league or championship in the sports complex that I'm playing in a league? I'm playing a part of a league and I want to be the next pickleball champion or a racquetball champion, tennis champion, squash champion, just have all the accolades and trophies and medals. Well, looking back on our lives 20, 30, 40 years from now, I don't think those things are going to be as important moving down the road. And then the average things would be paying your taxes, getting your groceries, staying healthy and active and fit, spirit, soul, and body, and having ways to live healthily. Those are average things. But to encourage myself and ourselves and the audience of how do we guard this place and this space is that we need to categorize and we need to do inventory of what are the important things in our lives that we need to prioritize. What are the things that are not important long term? Not saying they're evil by any means, but they're not important as important things are. And what are the average things that we need to make sure that we are responsible for in a day-by-day practice? But making sure that we are prioritizing the things that are important and not over prioritizing the things that are not important or average. Because if we do that, then we can get things upside down. Because the ancient Bible and the text and the scripture says, do not labor for the things which are seen, for they are temporary, but for the things that are not seen, because the things that are not seen are eternal. And this comes to a place of self-authoring. You may have heard the terminology self-authoring, and that is figuring out who we want to be on the earth, making a plan for that, getting clarity on our past and where we come from, but developing that into the important, into a narrative that helps stabilize these negative emotions and these distractions that can come our way with positive mindset and that incubating belief that we have the evidence of things unseen. That comes from the important and prioritizing that over the non-important and the average.
Yeah, and that resonates deeply. Like our inner life often sets the tone for everything external, yet it's the easiest to neglect.
Yes, it is absolutely can be the easiest. It can be the teddy bear on the shelf or the toy on the shelf that collects dust or cobwebs. It can be easy to neglect in our busy day and age.
Yeah, and spiritual senses can feel abstract. How do you help people translate intuition into actionable insights in their personal or professional lives?
That would be by encouraging the audience to take a census of our senses. And what do I mean by that? Well, a census is a terminology, especially in Roman times and ancient history, that comes from a decree or a call that went across the whole world. And to use an example from biblical history, there is a decree, a census went out through the whole land that the whole world would be taxed under the Roman Empire. Everybody would be taxed from every nation, from every tribe, from every tongue, from every country. And this was a decree. I use that as an example just to say in this similar place that in the same way that everybody in the world had to pay the tax, and still today, we all got to pay a tax. We all got to pay in some way. In the same regard, we all have five senses. We have our seeing, our tasting, our touching, our hearing, our smelling. We have these five physical senses. But I believe that these five physical senses are tied directly into our five spiritual senses. To use an example, when you can walk by somebody in public and you just have that gut feeling, you have this sense, you have this smell that, oh, something feels off about this person or situation, or, oh, something feels really right about this situation. That's our discernment. That's you could say, our spiritual smelling. Or foresight or visionary sight would be having a preparing for the future mentality of looking ahead and being proactive. That's having prophetic insight. That's looking ahead with our spiritual eyes and preparing for the days to come. Those are just a few examples, but taking a census of our senses and really taking all of them into account, because to make spirituality practical, we have to tie a bridge between our spiritual senses and our physical senses, because they are connected. It comes all back to that three-part trichotomous being that we are: spirit, soul, and body. We're spiritual beings that has a mind, will, and emotions, that's living in a physical avatar, and making that connection. It's like phone lines, right? It's like a phone line of communication. If you cut the phone line and the phone lines, well, what happens? Well, there's no communication in that city, in that neighborhood, in that house. In the same way, if we cut the tie between the spirit, soul, and body, and only the soul and body are communicating with one another, then there's no complete picture of communication. In the same way in which you cut the main power source for a city, or one of the main power sources, that city is not going to be able to communicate with each other in a way that it could with that main power bank. Create the connection, cultivate that connection, develop that connection, and practically continue to steward that bridge between the spirituality, your own individual walk, and your mindset of walking that out on the earth. That's what I believe to inspire the audience with, to make it practical. Make it practical, because one of the biggest misconceptions about spirituality is that it's just its own separate segment. We can push it off and kind of just disassociate that is its own category. Well, no, it's a category. It's an important engine that is supposed to actually intersect with our mindset and our physical walk on the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And can intuition ever mislead? And if yes, how should one discern the difference?
Intuition can mislead, especially if one has too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'm going to say this in a way where I'm going to offer my perspective on this, and I want to make sure that the audience understands. For one thing, that I have emphasized over different podcasts that I've been on and audiences that I've been in front of physically and obviously over the airwaves is take everything that I say, but especially what I'm about to say right now, just with a grain of salt. Chew on it, and if it doesn't make sense, just spit it out. It's fine. But here's what my perspective is: how intuition can go wrong. Intuition can go wrong if we have too many chefs in the kitchen. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if we have too many spiritualities or sources competing for our attention, or this is the right direction. That's why I believe myself in a one God, one creator of the universe, one spirit gate, one connection. Because if we're pulled off in too many different connections and we have one source for this and one source for that, and we have different categories and we're kind of just, we're scattered like butter over too much bread, then we're not going to have a pure flow and a focus. It's like if I'm sitting in the middle of a room and I have 5 people that are walking around me in a circle, and then all of a sudden the music stops in musical chairs and they all try pulling me in that direction. That is where intuition can go wrong, because I'm not going to be able to walk in my true design because I'm being pulled in different directions by these different sources. So I would encourage the audience with is find that one source. Find what God means to you. Ask God, ask the creator, ask spirit, higher power, whatever you attribute for to guide you, and to not be drawn into this source and that source and that source, because it's like sitting down in front of the television and watching Netflix or Amazon Prime. If we try searching for the show that we're going to watch all night long and don't camp on one, if you don't camp on the show that you're going to watch, what's going to happen? Well, it's time wasted and you never really come to a decision. So I encourage you as the audience, encouraging myself, encouraging everyone, find that one pure connection with God, with the Holy Spirit, with the Spirit of life, with Creator, with energy, with the Great Spirit, and let God guide you in a singular way that is cohesive to your walk on the earth.
Yeah, and that balance of trust and discomfort is so important, like intuition as guidance and not autopilot.
Yes, not autopilot, because if we do autopilot, we can get into our own soul and outside of the spiritual connection with our spirit and with the Great Spirit. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Caleb, for illuminating how bridge dreams, intuition, and action. To our listeners, open your senses, nurture your inner sanctuary, and remember that your unique calling is not just a vision, it's a life waiting to be lived.